Close your eyes for a little while, and let the busy sounds of the present drift far away. Imagine that the air has become warmer. The light around you has softened into the pale blue-gray color that comes just before sunrise. The stars are still quietly resting above the desert, and the world feels as though it is waiting for another gentle day to begin. Far below those fading stars, the Nile River moves without hurry. Its water glides through the darkness with the same calm rhythm it has known for thousands upon thousands of years. Along its banks, fields stretch into the distance. Tall reeds stand almost perfectly still. Palm trees sway only a little in the cool breeze that comes before the heat of the day. Small villages sleep beside the river. Their homes are built from sun-dried mud bricks, their walls carrying the warmth of yesterday's sun. Flat roofs rest quietly beneath the fading night. Inside each home, families sleep close together on woven mats, wrapped in simple linen cloth. The silence is deep but never empty. Somewhere a dog shifts in its sleep. Somewhere else, a donkey lets out a slow breath before becoming quiet once again. The desert beyond the green river valley waits patiently. During the afternoon it will shimmer beneath the heavy sun, but now it is gentle and cool. Sand lies smooth beneath the moonlight. The wind brushes across it so softly that almost no sound can be heard. This peaceful moment never lasts very long. Long before the bright morning fills the sky, the first people begin to wake. Not because clocks tell them to. Not because bells ring across the villages. But because life beside the Nile has always followed the quiet rhythm of the sun. An ancient Egyptian morning begins before daylight. Eyes slowly open. Hands reach across cool woven mats. Someone quietly stands, careful not to wake the youngest child sleeping nearby. Bare feet touch the packed earth floor. The room is still dark enough that shapes are only gentle shadows. Outside, the air feels pleasant against tired skin. For a few precious moments, the heat has not yet arrived. This is often the favorite part of the day. The village seems wrapped in a blanket of stillness. Smoke has not yet begun rising from cooking fires. Oxen are still resting. Fishing boats remain tied along the riverbank. The workshops have not opened. Even the birds wait a little longer before filling the air with song. But inside many homes, one important task begins almost immediately. Breakfast. Not a grand feast. Not a table overflowing with food. Just enough to prepare for another long day beneath the Egyptian sun. For ordinary people, breakfast is never an afterthought. It is the quiet beginning of everything that follows. The builders who lift heavy stone. The farmers who walk behind wooden plows. The scribes who spend hours bent over smooth sheets of papyrus. The fishermen rowing against the slow current. The women grinding grain for hours. The children carrying baskets or helping with animals. Every one of them begins the day with food that has been prepared through patience, skill, and countless small routines passed from one generation to another. To understand an ancient Egyptian breakfast, we must begin long before dawn. In truth, we must begin many months earlier. Because every loaf of bread starts with the Nile itself. Each year the great river quietly leaves its banks. Floodwaters spread across the valley, covering fields with rich dark mud carried from lands far to the south. When the waters slowly return to their usual path, they leave behind fertile soil unlike almost anywhere else. Farmers know exactly what comes next. With simple wooden tools and patient hands, they prepare the earth. Seeds are scattered carefully. Barley. Emmer wheat. The grains that feed villages, temples, workers, and families across Egypt. The work is slow. There are no large machines. Only people. Animals. Simple tools. Strong backs. Patient hands. Morning after morning, the fields become greener. The first soft shoots appear. Weeks pass quietly. The warm sun climbs across the sky every day. Cool nights allow the plants to rest. The river continues its endless journey north. Eventually the grain grows tall enough to sway gently whenever the wind crosses the valley. Looking across those fields must have been a peaceful sight. Golden heads of grain stretching toward the horizon. Birds occasionally landing between them. Children chasing one another along narrow paths. Farmers stopping only briefly to drink water before returning to work. Harvest season arrives with little celebration. There is simply too much work waiting. Families gather together. Sharp flint blades fixed into wooden handles cut through the grain. Bundle after bundle is tied together. Donkeys carry heavy loads. Dust rises into the warm air. Everyone works steadily. No one rushes. The harvest depends upon careful hands more than speed. Later, the grain is separated from its stalks. Sometimes animals walk across it. Sometimes workers strike the bundles by hand. The small kernels fall free little by little. Then comes another patient task. Winnowing. Large baskets toss the grain into the breeze. The lighter chaff drifts away. The heavier kernels fall back into waiting hands. Again. And again. And again. It is repetitive work. Quiet work. Necessary work. Without these simple movements, there can be no breakfast tomorrow. The grain eventually finds its way into storage jars. Some are sealed carefully inside family homes. Others fill temple storehouses. Others become wages for workers building monuments that will stand for thousands of years. Yet for one ordinary family living beside the Nile, a single storage jar represents something much simpler. Another morning meal. Weeks later, before sunrise, someone opens that heavy clay jar. A cool earthy smell escapes into the room. Hands reach inside. The grain feels dry and firm. Just enough is gathered for the day ahead. Now another familiar sound begins. Grinding. Perhaps no sound is more common in an ancient Egyptian morning. Stone against stone. A slow scraping rhythm. Steady. Patient. Never hurried. A woman kneels beside a large flat grinding stone. Her hands guide another smooth stone back and forth across the grain. The movement hardly changes. Forward. Back. Forward. Back. Minute after minute. The grain slowly becomes flour. Tiny clouds of pale dust rise into the air. Some settle across her arms. Some cling to her linen clothing. Some drift toward the morning light beginning to enter through the doorway. Grinding grain is exhausting. The shoulders ache. The wrists become tired. The knees grow sore from remaining in one position. Yet this task repeats almost every day. Sometimes daughters learn beside their mothers. Young hands imitate older hands. The rhythm becomes familiar long before adulthood. Few people think much about it. It is simply part of life. Eventually the flour becomes soft enough. Water is added. Sometimes a little salt. Sometimes yesterday's sourdough helps today's bread rise just enough. Hands mix everything together inside a clay bowl. The dough is folded. Pressed. Turned. Pressed again. Simple movements repeated over many years until they become almost effortless. Nearby, someone prepares the oven. Many Egyptian ovens are shaped like tall clay cylinders. The inside grows hot as dried reeds, straw, or small pieces of wood burn slowly. The smell of warm earth mixes with wood smoke. Soon the dough is placed inside. Now another wonderful smell begins filling the home. Fresh bread. Rich. Warm. Comforting. The scent escapes through open doorways into narrow village paths. Neighbors smell it too. One family begins baking. Then another. Soon the entire village carries the gentle fragrance of bread greeting another sunrise. Bread is not merely food. It is the center of nearly every meal. Rich families enjoy many varieties. Poor families rely upon simpler loaves. But almost everyone eats bread. Some loaves are round. Some are long. Some are thick. Some are small enough to fit comfortably into one hand. Some are flavored with herbs. Others contain dates. Sometimes sesame seeds. Sometimes figs. Most remain beautifully simple. The crust forms slowly. The inside stays dense and filling. It is exactly the kind of food needed before hours of physical labor. While the bread bakes, another familiar task quietly begins. Beer. To modern ears, beer might sound unusual as part of breakfast. But Egyptian beer is quite different from many modern kinds. It is thick, nutritious, often cloudy, sometimes almost like drinking liquid bread. Children may drink weaker versions. Adults drink stronger ones. It provides energy, water, and nourishment throughout long working days. The brewing process itself begins with grain. Bread is baked partly, then broken apart and mixed with water. Natural fermentation quietly transforms the mixture over time. The result is poured through simple strainers before being stored in jars. Early in the morning, someone removes the lid from one of these jars. The smell is mild, earthy, comforting. A clay cup is filled. There is nothing rushed about the moment. Just another familiar part of another ordinary day. Breakfast slowly comes together. Fresh bread. Beer. Perhaps onions. Perhaps garlic. Sometimes fresh herbs gathered nearby. Sometimes dried fish from yesterday's catch. Sometimes dates. Sometimes figs. Sometimes soft white cheese if goats or cattle have provided milk. Nothing appears extravagant. Everything feels practical. Each bite carries the work of many hands. Farmers, millers, bakers, fishermen, herders, potters, boatmen. Entire communities quietly support one another without ever saying so aloud. Inside one small home, a father finally wakes. Years of working beneath the sun have darkened his skin. Fine lines rest around his eyes. His hands are rough from lifting stone blocks at a nearby construction site. He stretches slowly. His muscles remind him of yesterday. They also quietly prepare him for today. His wife places warm bread beside him. Steam rises gently. He tears away a piece. The crust cracks softly. The inside remains warm and dense. He dips it into a small bowl containing crushed herbs mixed with oil. The flavor is simple, fresh, earthy. Enough to satisfy hunger without slowing the body. Nearby, two children wake more slowly. Their hair is tousled from sleep. One rubs tired eyes. The younger child yawns without trying to hide it. Soon they too receive small pieces of bread. Perhaps a date if the family has been fortunate recently. Perhaps only bread today. Neither child seems disappointed. Breakfast has always looked much the same. It is familiar. reliable, comforting. Outside, the eastern horizon begins changing color. Soft gray becomes pale blue. Blue slowly welcomes gentle shades of gold. The first sunlight reaches the tops of distant palm trees. Birds begin singing. Donkeys shuffle their feet. Somewhere nearby, an ox snorts quietly. The village slowly wakes together. Doors open. Neighbors greet one another with calm voices. Smoke rises from many rooftops. A fisherman walks toward the river carrying neatly folded nets over one shoulder. A young apprentice hurries toward a carpenter's workshop while still chewing breakfast. An elderly woman sweeps dust from her doorway using a bundle of reeds. The air smells of warm bread, clay ovens, damp river water, and fresh morning. It is a beautiful hour. One that disappears quickly once the heat arrives. Along the Nile itself, boats begin moving away from shore. Long wooden oars dip quietly into calm water. Each stroke sends small circles spreading across the river. Fishermen know the morning offers some of the gentlest conditions. Mist lingers above the surface. The rising sun paints everything with soft golden light. Some fishermen carry breakfast with them. Bread wrapped inside linen cloth. A handful of onions. Perhaps dried fish saved from yesterday. They eat slowly while waiting for nets to settle beneath the water. Nothing is wasted. Every meal is appreciated because every meal requires work. Even the simple clay bowls holding breakfast tell quiet stories. A village potter shaped them months earlier. His hands turned wet clay into useful objects. The bowls dried beneath the Egyptian sun before entering a hot kiln. Now they rest inside homes throughout the village. One bowl holds flour. Another holds dates. Another carries water drawn from the Nile. Simple objects become part of daily life for many years. Few people think about who made them. Yet every breakfast depends upon countless unseen workers. As the morning grows brighter, the sounds of eating slowly give way to the sounds of labor. Wooden doors close behind departing families. Sandals scrape softly across dusty paths. Voices become fewer as everyone walks toward fields, workshops, temples, and building sites. Only older family members, very young children, and those preparing the next meal remain behind. Inside the now quieter homes, crumbs remain upon low tables. The ovens slowly cool. Clay cups stand nearly empty. The peaceful beginning of another Egyptian day has quietly come to an end. But the story of breakfast has only just begun. Because every loaf, every drink, every simple meal carries the history of an entire civilization, lived not only by kings and queens, but by millions of ordinary people whose gentle morning routines have long since faded into the warm desert air. The sun has now arisen fully above the eastern edge of the Nile Valley, and the soft coolness of dawn begins to fade. Light spills across the fields, across the mud brick homes, and across the narrow paths where villagers have already disappeared into their daily work. The morning that began so gently with warm bread and quiet conversation is becoming brighter, warmer, and busier with each passing moment. Inside many homes, the breakfast bowls have been set aside, but the memory of the meal lingers in the air. The scent of baked grain remains near the oven. A few crumbs rest on a woven mat. A clay cup still holds the last cloudy sip of beer. These small traces are ordinary, yet they reveal something important. Breakfast is not only food. It is the moment that prepares the body for everything that follows. For a stone worker heading toward a construction site, that morning bread will soon become strength in his shoulders and arms. For a farmer guiding an ox through wet soil, it will become steady energy beneath the growing heat. For a scribe sitting cross-legged beside a wooden writing board, it will help him remain focused through long hours of careful work. The Egyptian day is demanding, and everyone knows it. As the sun climbs higher, the air grows warmer against the skin. Dust begins to rise from the roads. Sandals leave faint marks on the packed earth. In the distance, the sound of hammers striking stone echoes from a building site where workers have already started their labor. One man carries a small cloth bundle tucked beneath his arm. Inside are pieces of the same bread he ate before sunrise. He saved part of his breakfast for later because the work ahead will be long. Another worker carries onions hanging from a cord. A third has a small jar containing beer. Their meals remain simple, but they are carefully planned. Near the river, fishermen pull in their first nets of the morning. The water glitters beneath the strengthening light. Some of the fish will be sold fresh in nearby markets. Some will be salted and dried for future meals. Perhaps tomorrow a family will place a few strips of that dried fish beside their breakfast bread. The connection between one morning and the next is constant. Nothing begins suddenly. Everything grows from earlier work. In a different part of the village, a baker continues preparing bread even after her own family has eaten. Larger households, temples, and groups of workers require many loaves each day. She kneads another batch of dough while sweat begins to form along her forehead. The coolness of dawn has vanished from the bakery. Heat from the oven fills the room, and the smell of baking grain becomes richer and deeper. Her hands move automatically. Press. Fold. Turn. Press again. Years of practice have made the movements smooth and unhurried. She does not need to think about each step. The dough responds to her touch, becoming soft and elastic beneath her palms. Outside her doorway, a donkey waits patiently beside several empty baskets. Soon those baskets will carry fresh bread through the village. A young boy will deliver the loaves to homes, workshops, and perhaps even to a nearby temple where priests have already completed their early rituals. Temples have their own breakfast routines. Before the city fully awakens, priests wash carefully, dress in clean linen, and prepare offerings for the gods. Bread is often among those offerings. Loaves of different shapes are arranged with fruit, beer, and other foods. The ceremonies are performed quietly and with great care. For the priests, breakfast is connected not only to hunger but also to order, gratitude, and the proper beginning of the day. Farther from the village, in the open fields, farmers pause briefly after several hours of work. The sun is now strong enough that shadows have become shorter. One farmer sits beneath the narrow shade of a palm tree and unwraps the bread he carried from home. The loaf is no longer warm, but it remains filling. He breaks it into pieces and shares some with a younger relative working beside him. They eat without hurry. The breeze carries the scent of wet soil from recently watered fields. Insects hum among the reeds. Somewhere nearby, an ox shakes its head, causing the wooden yoke to creak softly. The meal is small, but it is enough. In ancient Egypt, many people eat several modest meals rather than one large feast. Breakfast provides the first foundation of the day, especially for those whose work depends upon physical endurance. Meanwhile, in a larger town farther north along the Nile, a market is beginning to fill with people. Merchants spread woven mats on the ground. Baskets of dates appear. Figs are arranged carefully. Fresh vegetables are carried in from nearby farms. The smell of bread mixes with the smell of river fish and crushed herbs. A woman buying food for her household examines several loaves before choosing one. She presses gently against the crust, testing its firmness. The baker nods quietly. Coins are not always exchanged. Sometimes grain, cloth, labor, or other goods serve as payment. Trade in Egypt often feels personal and familiar. People know one another. They recognize faces. They remember whose bread was especially good last week. Near the edge of the market, an elderly man sits with a basket of onions and garlic. These humble foods appear again and again in Egyptian meals. They are inexpensive, easy to store, and valued for both flavor and nourishment. Many workers eat them with bread almost every day. The old man watches the crowd calmly as the morning grows hotter. A few customers stop to buy small bundles. He wraps them in leaves or places them directly into waiting baskets. Even this simple exchange becomes part of someone else's breakfast tomorrow. Back in the village, children who remained at home after the early meal begin helping with household tasks. One carries water from the river in a clay jar. Another gathers dried reeds for cooking fires. A girl helps her mother clean grain for the next batch of flour. She spreads the kernels across a shallow tray and picks out small stones or bits of chaff. The work requires patience. If stones remain in the grain, they may damage the grinding stone or end up in the bread. Generations of Egyptian families spend countless hours performing these careful tasks. Few written records celebrate them. No monuments are built in their honor. Yet without them, the famous monuments of Egypt could never have been constructed. The workers who raise temples and pyramids must first eat breakfast. As the day continues, the heat becomes heavy and pressing. The pleasant coolness remembered from dawn feels very far away. Air shimmers above the ground. The walls of mud brick houses grow warm to the touch. People who can find shade often do so. In workshops, artisans continue their labor. A carpenter shapes wood with simple tools. A weaver works at a loom. A potter turns wet clay into bowls that may someday hold morning bread or beer. Each artisan depends upon the same cycle of grain, baking, eating, and working. At midday, some workers will eat again. But the memory of breakfast remains important because it was eaten during the coolest and most comfortable part of the day. Many Egyptians understand that early food helps them endure the difficult hours that follow. In wealthier homes, breakfast may include a greater variety of foods. A merchant's family might enjoy fresh fruit, honey, soft cheese, and finer bread made from carefully sifted flour. Servants move quietly through shaded courtyards carrying trays of food and drink. Even here, however, bread remains central. Whether in a humble village or a prosperous household, the Egyptian morning almost always begins with grain transformed by human hands. By late afternoon, the intensity of the sun slowly begins to ease. Long shadows return across the fields. Workers start making their way home. Dust clings to their sandals and lower legs. Their shoulders ache from carrying loads. Their hands feel rough from tools and ropes. As they walk back through the village, many pass the same bakery where the day began. The ovens may still be warm. Another batch of bread may already be prepared for the evening meal or for tomorrow's breakfast. The cycle never truly stops. Grain becomes flour. Flour becomes dough. Dough becomes bread. Bread becomes strength. Strength becomes labor. Labor produces the grain for another season. When the workers finally enter their homes, the air inside feels cooler than the open road. Children greet them. Water is poured into clay cups. Evening food is prepared. Yet before long, thoughts quietly turn toward the next morning. Is there enough grain left in the storage jar? Should more flour be ground before dawn? Will the fishermen bring fresh fish tomorrow? Are there dates remaining for the children? These are the practical questions that shape ordinary life beside the Nile. As darkness settles over the valley, the village grows quieter again. Cooking fires dim. Voices become softer. One by one, families prepare for sleep. Mats are spread across the floor. Linen cloths are folded nearby. Outside, the river continues its slow journey through the night. Stars appear above the palm trees. A warm breeze moves gently between the houses. Somewhere in the darkness, a woman places grain beside the grinding stone so it will be ready before sunrise. Tomorrow, long before the first light touches the Nile, another Egyptian breakfast will begin. Another loaf will bake. Another cup of beer will be poured. Another family will gather in the quiet coolness before the heat arrives. And the ancient rhythm of bread, river, and morning will continue once more. Night has settled gently over the Nile Valley once again. The warmth of the day still lingers in the mud brick walls, but the air has become softer, carrying a quiet breeze across the river. The sounds of work have faded. The stone hammers have fallen silent. The boats have been tied to their posts. The cattle rest in their simple shelters, and even the birds have tucked themselves into the reeds along the water's edge. Inside the homes, the evening meal has long since ended. Clay bowls have been rinsed with precious water. Small cooking fires have burned low until only glowing embers remain. A faint smell of smoke drifts through the rooms, mixing with the earthy scent of baked clay and woven reed mats. Families prepare for sleep. The youngest children are often the first to grow sleepy. After a full day of helping with small chores or playing in the dusty lanes between the houses, their eyes grow heavy almost as soon as darkness arrives. Mothers smooth their linen blankets. Fathers stretch tired muscles that have worked beneath the desert sun since before dawn. The day has been long. Tomorrow will be much the same. There is comfort in knowing exactly what the morning will bring. Outside, the Nile flows quietly beneath the stars. Its gentle movement has guided life here for countless generations. Long before anyone living today was born, the river followed this same path. Long after today's families are gone, it will continue its slow journey north toward the Great Sea. The river never seems to hurry. Perhaps that is why life beside it also follows such a patient rhythm. During the deepest part of the night, very little moves. Only an occasional breeze stirs the palm leaves. A small owl glides silently above the fields. Somewhere in the distance, a donkey shifts its weight before becoming still once again. The village rests. Hours pass almost unnoticed. The stars slowly travel across the sky. Then, without anyone needing to announce it, another morning begins to approach. The eastern horizon changes so gradually that few people would notice the first hint of pale light. The darkness becomes softer. The air grows just a little cooler before the coming heat. This is the favorite hour for many Egyptians. The world feels peaceful. It belongs neither to yesterday nor fully to today. One by one, people begin waking. An elderly grandmother is among the first. Years have made her movements slower, but they have also made them wonderfully quiet. She rises carefully from her woven sleeping mat, places her feet upon the cool packed earth floor, and pauses for a moment. The house is silent. She listens. Only the slow breathing of sleeping grandchildren fills the room. She smiles gently to herself before stepping outside. The village remains wrapped in soft blue shadows. She carries a clay jar toward the water. Morning water is cool against her hands. She fills the jar carefully, watching small circles spread across the calm surface of the Nile. The river reflects the fading stars. For a few moments, there is almost no difference between the sky above and the water below. Returning home, she places the heavy jar beside the doorway. Soon everyone else will wake. Soon breakfast must begin. Nearby, another household has already started preparing grain. A young woman kneels beside a large grinding stone that has belonged to her family for many years. The stone is smooth from endless use. Its surface has been shaped not by carving, but by thousands of mornings exactly like this one. She pours a small amount of barley onto the lower stone. Taking the hand stone in both hands, she begins the familiar movement. Forward. Back. Forward. Back. The sound is soft. Almost like quiet breathing. Stone brushing against stone. Grain slowly becoming flour. Nothing about the task is hurried. There is no reason to rush. The sun has not yet risen. The day's hardest work still lies ahead. For now, there is only the comforting rhythm of preparation. As she grinds, another family member quietly sweeps yesterday's dust from the floor using a bundle of dried reeds. Dust is always returning. The dry Egyptian climate makes certain of that. Every morning begins with sweeping. Every evening ends with more dust settling gently across the floor. It is simply another small rhythm of life. Children slowly begin waking. One little boy rubs his eyes and yawns. His older sister is already awake, helping arrange clay bowls upon a low wooden table. She has watched her mother prepare breakfast every morning for as long as she can remember. Without needing instructions, she places the bowls exactly where they belong. The flour is ready. Now water is added. Cool river water disappears into the pale grain. The mixture is stirred with steady hands. The dough begins to form. It feels rough at first. Then softer. Then smooth enough to shape. The smell is gentle. Fresh grain has its own quiet fragrance. Earthy. Clean. Comforting. The clay oven nearby still carries a little warmth from yesterday. Dry reeds and small bundles of straw are carefully arranged inside. A spark catches. Tiny flames appear. Soon they grow brighter. The oven slowly awakens with the village. Outside, other cooking fires begin appearing one after another. From a distance, thin streams of pale smoke rise into the morning air. Each small column marks another household preparing breakfast. Another family beginning another ordinary day. The smell spreads slowly through the narrow streets. Warm bread. Wood smoke. Fresh flour. It is one of the oldest morning scents in human history. Not far away, an experienced baker has already begun making bread for many households. His workshop is larger than most family kitchens. Shelves line the walls. Clay molds of different sizes stand ready. Several ovens glow softly in the dim light. He works almost without speaking. Years have taught him to judge dough simply by touch. He knows whether it needs more water. He knows whether it has rested long enough. He knows which oven is hottest. His apprentice watches closely. The young man hopes that one day his own hands will move with the same quiet confidence. The apprentice lifts a finished loaf. Its surface is golden brown. Steam rises gently through tiny cracks in the crust. The baker nods with quiet approval. The loaf joins many others cooling upon woven baskets. Soon they will travel across the village. Bread does not stay in one place for long. It moves constantly from oven to home, from home to worker, from worker to field. Near the workshop, a merchant prepares for the day's market. He checks baskets filled with onions, garlic, figs, and dates. Each item has its place. The onions still carry traces of dark soil from the fields. The figs are soft beneath careful fingers. The dates shine slightly in the growing morning light. Some families will buy them for breakfast. Others will save them for later in the day. Children especially enjoy their sweetness. Honey is much more expensive. Dates are nature's quiet gift along the Nile. In another part of the settlement, a fisherman returns earlier than expected. He left while the stars were still bright. His small boat glided almost silently across the calm water. Now his nets contain several fresh fish. Not a great catch. Not a poor one either. Enough. Enough is often all that matters. His wife smiles when she sees him approaching. Some of today's fish will be eaten this evening. Others will be cleaned, salted, and dried beneath the Egyptian sun. Weeks from now, one of those preserved fish may become part of another peaceful breakfast. Nothing is wasted. The Egyptians understand the value of careful planning. The river provides generously, but only to those willing to work with patience. As sunrise approaches, birds begin filling the air with quiet songs. White ibises step carefully through the marshes. Herons stand perfectly still in shallow water. Small swallows dart above the fields, chasing insects already awake. Farmers notice these familiar sights almost without thinking. Nature has become their calendar. The birds, the wind, the river, the changing light. Everything quietly tells them when to plant, when to harvest, and when another working day has begun. Back inside the homes, breakfast is nearly ready. Fresh loaves are broken apart by hand rather than cut with knives. The rough crust gives way with a satisfying crackle. The inside is warm and pleasantly dense. Small pieces are placed into waiting bowls. Some families drizzle a little oil over the bread. Others crumble soft white cheese across the surface. A few fortunate households add fresh herbs gathered from small gardens near irrigation canals. The smell becomes even richer. Mint. Coriander. Perhaps dill. Simple flavors. Fresh flavors. Nothing complicated. Just food prepared with care. A father sits beside his children. Before eating, he quietly checks their small linen bags. Inside are pieces of bread wrapped for later. He knows they will become hungry long before the afternoon. The bread may be firm by then, but it will still nourish them. The children accept the bundles happily. They understand that this is how every morning begins. One daughter carefully tucks a few dates beside her bread. She hopes to save them until midday. Whether she succeeds depends upon how hungry she becomes. Across the village, another family eats outdoors. The morning air remains cool enough to enjoy. They sit beneath the shade of a sycamore tree. Sunlight filters gently through the leaves. The first golden rays touch the clay walls of nearby houses. The father closes his eyes for just a moment as he takes his first bite of warm bread. He has eaten thousands of breakfasts. Many have been almost exactly like this one. Yet each morning still carries its own quiet beauty. There is something deeply comforting about familiar routines. The same bread. The same river. The same gentle sunrise. The same family gathered together before another day of work. Nearby, an elderly man walks slowly through the village carrying fresh milk from a small herd of goats. The clay jar balanced upon his shoulder moves gently with each careful step. A few households purchase enough milk to make fresh cheese. Others simply enjoy a small cup before beginning their labor. Goats are easier to keep than cattle in many places. They wander across rocky ground where larger animals struggle. Their milk becomes another quiet part of Egyptian breakfasts. Meanwhile, scribes begin preparing for their own mornings. Unlike the builders or farmers, their work demands long hours of careful concentration rather than heavy lifting. Even so, breakfast remains important. A hungry scribe finds it difficult to write neat rows of hieratic script across smooth papyrus. Inside a government office near a temple, one young scribe unwraps a small loaf before arranging his writing tools. His reed pens rest neatly beside a palette containing black and red ink. Only after eating does he begin copying records of grain deliveries, tax payments, and harvest totals. Each careful line he writes tells another story of food moving through Egypt. Grain counted. Bread distributed. Beer supplied. Storehouses filled. Without realizing it, he records the quiet foundation of daily life. Not far away, laborers assembling stone blocks for a temple receive their morning meal together. Large baskets overflow with bread. Clay jars of beer stand nearby. Workers gather in small groups before beginning another day beneath the blazing sun. Some sit silently. Others exchange gentle conversation. No one rushes through the meal. They know how important these few peaceful moments are before the hard work begins. One man tears his loaf in half and shares it with an older co-worker whose portion is smaller today. The older man accepts with a grateful smile. No words are needed. Kindness often appears in the simplest forms. A shared piece of bread. A drink passed from one hand to another. A place in the shade. The morning continues unfolding across the Nile Valley. Every village. Every farm. Every workshop. Every riverside home. Thousands upon thousands of breakfasts are quietly taking place. Some are richer. Some are poorer. Some include fresh fruit. Others contain only bread and beer. Yet together they form the steady heartbeat of ancient Egypt. Long before the great monuments rise into the bright sky each day, long before scribes fill their scrolls with careful writing, long before merchants bargain in crowded markets, the people of the Nile begin with the same gentle ritual. They wake before the sun. They grind the grain. They bake the bread. They gather with family. And in the peaceful coolness of another ancient morning, they quietly prepare themselves for whatever the day will bring. The first warmth of the morning has now settled gently across the Nile Valley. The cool blue light that welcomed the earliest workers has slowly changed into soft gold, and the river reflects the growing brightness like a polished ribbon stretching through the land. Palm trees cast long shadows that reach across the fields, while narrow canals quietly carry life-giving water toward rows of barley and emmer wheat. Breakfast has finished in many homes, but its quiet influence remains everywhere. A full stomach brings steady hands. A warm loaf shared with family leaves behind more than nourishment. It leaves a feeling of readiness. The village begins to move with calm purpose. Doors made from woven reeds swing open one after another. Sandaled feet step onto dusty paths that have been walked for generations. Every footprint soon disappears beneath the dry earth, yet every morning new ones appear, following almost exactly the same routes as yesterday. A young farmer walks toward his fields carrying a wooden hoe across one shoulder. His breakfast was simple. A thick piece of barley bread. Half of an onion. A small cup of beer. Nothing more. Yet he feels prepared for the long hours ahead. His wife remains behind for a little while longer. She washes the clay bowls in a basin of water, rubbing each one carefully with sand before rinsing it clean. Soap does not exist as people know it today, but fine sand is surprisingly useful for removing bits of dough and dried food from smooth pottery. When the bowls are finished, she places them upside down upon a low shelf to dry naturally in the warm air. Nothing is hurried. The pace of the morning remains steady and unbroken. Nearby, a small girl helps her grandmother gather fresh herbs from a tiny garden beside the house. The garden is modest. A few green onions. Some coriander. Mint growing close to a damp irrigation channel. The herbs release their fragrance as they are picked. The scent is fresh and cool against the warming air. These small plants do not seem remarkable, yet they quietly change the taste of many breakfasts. A pinch of chopped herbs scattered over soft cheese or mixed into bread brings color and freshness to an otherwise simple meal. The grandmother smiles as she hands a few leaves to the child. The little girl rubs them gently between her fingers before lifting them to her nose. She laughs softly at the pleasant smell. Perhaps years from now she will remember this peaceful morning while preparing breakfast for her own family. Many Egyptian traditions are learned in moments exactly like these. Not through formal lessons. Not through written instructions. But through quiet observation. A child watches. A child helps. A child remembers. In time, those memories become daily habits. As the village grows busier, the baker's workshop is already surrounded by customers. Fresh loaves continue emerging from the hot clay ovens. Some are large enough to feed an entire household. Others are smaller, shaped for a single worker carrying lunch into the fields. The baker uses a long wooden paddle to reach deep inside the oven. Each loaf is turned carefully so it browns evenly. The smell is impossible to ignore. Warm grain. Light smoke. Earth baked by fire. Even those who have already eaten cannot help but notice it drifting through the village streets. The baker wipes flour from his hands onto his linen apron before greeting another customer. A fisherman has arrived carrying several fresh fish wrapped in reeds. Instead of paying with grain, he offers part of his morning catch. The exchange is friendly. Neither man seems to calculate every detail. They have traded with one another many times before. Trust has grown slowly over the years, just as the grain grows slowly beneath the Egyptian sun. The baker accepts the fish. The fisherman leaves carrying 2 warm loaves tucked beneath one arm. Tomorrow the exchange may happen differently. Perhaps the baker will need fresh reeds for his oven. Perhaps the fisherman will need more bread. Life beside the Nile often depends upon these quiet relationships. Farther along the dusty road, an elderly shepherd guides a small flock of goats toward open grazing land. The animals move lazily, stopping now and then to nibble dry plants growing among scattered stones. Goats are patient animals. They seem perfectly suited to the slow rhythm of the Egyptian countryside. The shepherd himself carries breakfast in a woven bag. He waits until the flock settles before sitting beneath the shade of an acacia tree. There he removes yesterday's bread. It is firm now. The crust has become harder overnight. Still, it is satisfying. He dips small pieces into goat's milk before eating. The bread softens almost immediately. The meal is quiet. The only sounds are distant birds and the gentle chewing of the goats nearby. Time seems to pass differently in moments like these. There is no rush. Only the steady movement of the sun across the sky. Near one of the irrigation canals, several women wash vegetables gathered before sunrise. The cool water slips across onions, lettuce, cucumbers, and bundles of herbs. Each vegetable carries traces of dark soil. As the dirt washes away, bright colors appear beneath. Green, white, soft purple. Although breakfast has already ended, these vegetables will become tomorrow's meal or the evening's supper. Food preparation is never truly finished. One meal quietly leads into another. One day's work prepares the next day's breakfast. A little farther away, children carry woven baskets filled with grain toward a communal grinding area. The baskets are not especially heavy for adults, but to young children they require careful balance. They walk slowly, sometimes laughing, sometimes stopping to rest. The older children help the younger ones whenever a basket begins to tilt. At the grinding stones, several women are already working. The familiar scraping sound fills the air. Stone against grain. Stone against stone. Again. And again. The rhythm almost resembles gentle music. Visitors from distant lands might find the work repetitive. The women themselves rarely think about it that way. It has always been part of life. The muscles of their shoulders have grown strong through years of grinding flour. Even their posture reflects long practice. The movements are efficient, graceful in their own quiet way. As the flour grows finer beneath the grinding stone, tiny clouds drift upward into the sunlight. Golden rays pass through the dust, making the air appear almost luminous. One woman pauses briefly to stretch her back. Another wipes flour from her forehead. They exchange a few soft words before returning to their work. Conversation often accompanies these long tasks. News travels this way. Stories are shared. Children are gently corrected. Advice passes from older generations to younger ones. The grinding stones become places not only of labor but also of community. Nearby, a young mother rocks her baby while continuing to sort grain. The child watches the moving hands with wide, curious eyes. Perhaps the soft scraping sounds will become some of the earliest memories of life. The smell of fresh flour. The warmth of morning sunlight. The quiet voices of neighbors. These simple experiences shape childhood in ancient Egypt. At the edge of the village stands a modest brewery. Its walls are darkened slightly from years of smoke and steam. Inside, several workers prepare another batch of beer. The process is careful and surprisingly gentle. Loaves baked especially for brewing are crumbled into large clay vessels. Water is added. The mixture rests patiently. Nothing can be forced. Fermentation follows its own quiet rhythm. The workers know exactly how long to wait. Experience has taught them. One brewer lifts the lid from a vessel and smiles faintly. The aroma tells him everything he needs to know. Soon the finished beer will be poured into sealed jars. Some jars will travel to nearby villages. Others will supply workers building temples. Many will eventually appear beside breakfast bread in homes throughout the valley. Beer is not simply a drink. It is nourishment. It is part of daily life from childhood to old age. Its cloudy appearance and mild flavor are familiar to nearly everyone. As the morning continues, the river itself grows busier. Long wooden boats glide quietly through calm water. Some carry grain. Others transport stone blocks. Still others bring baskets of vegetables, woven cloth, pottery, or livestock. The Nile serves as Egypt's great road. Its gentle current connects villages separated by many miles. A merchant sitting beneath a simple linen canopy unwraps his breakfast while drifting downstream. His boat moves slowly with the current. He tears bread into small pieces and eats while watching the shoreline pass. Fields alternate with villages. Palm groves give way to reed marshes. Children wave from the riverbank. Women wash clothing at the water's edge. Fishermen lift dripping nets into their boats. Everything feels peaceful. The river itself seems to encourage patience. No one expects to travel quickly. Instead, people watch the changing scenery. They notice birds landing among the reeds. They listen to the soft splash of oars entering the water. Even breakfast tastes different when eaten beneath an open sky surrounded by quiet water. By now the sun has climbed much higher. The heat begins pressing gently against every surface. Stone walls warm steadily. The packed earth paths grow brighter beneath the intense light. Workers wrap linen cloth around their heads to shield themselves from the strongest rays. Still, they continue. The energy provided by breakfast carries them through these difficult hours. A stonemason pauses long enough to drink from a clay jar. Nearby he unwraps the last piece of bread saved from the morning. It is dry now. He chews slowly. Each bite restores a little more strength. Around him, dozens of other workers do exactly the same. Bread. Beer. Onions. Sometimes dried fish. Simple food. Hard-earned food. Food that has traveled from fertile fields, through grinding stones and ovens, into the hands of those who build Egypt one day at a time. The monuments that future generations will admire begin with ordinary breakfasts. Every carved stone depends upon a worker who woke before sunrise. Every painted temple wall depends upon someone whose day started with warm bread beside a quiet cooking fire. History often remembers kings. Yet the mornings belong to ordinary people. As afternoon slowly approaches, the village settles into the steady rhythm that has guided countless generations. Breakfast has become a memory now, but it is a comforting one. The ovens will cool for a little while. The grinding stones will rest until evening preparations begin. Children will play beneath patches of shade. Farmers will continue tending the fields. Boats will drift along the Nile. And somewhere, perhaps without even realizing it, a mother will quietly look into a grain jar and think ahead to tomorrow morning. She will judge how much flour remains. She will wonder whether another loaf should be baked before sunrise. She will plan which herbs to gather. Whether there is enough cheese. Whether the dates should be saved for the children. These gentle thoughts are never dramatic. They are simply part of caring for a family. One quiet decision after another. One peaceful morning preparing the next. And as the golden light continues to spread across the timeless valley, the endless rhythm of ancient Egyptian breakfast quietly carries on, just as faithfully as the slow, patient waters of the Nile itself. The morning has now settled fully across the Nile Valley. The golden light is stronger than it was at dawn, yet it has not reached the harsh brightness that will arrive later in the afternoon. A gentle breeze still moves through the reeds along the riverbank, carrying the scent of fresh water across the fields before the day's heat slowly claims the air. The village has found its comfortable rhythm. Every person seems to know where they belong. The baker continues tending his ovens. The farmers work among their crops. The fishermen guide their boats through the quiet channels of the Nile. Children carry water, gather reeds, or help watch the family's goats. Nothing feels rushed. Nothing feels uncertain. Each morning follows the gentle pattern that has been repeated for generations. Breakfast may already be over, but the work that makes breakfast possible never truly ends. In one shaded courtyard, an elderly woman sits beside a large woven basket filled with barley. Her hands move slowly through the grain, lifting one handful after another into the sunlight. She studies each handful with patient eyes. Tiny pieces of straw are removed. Small stones are picked away. Broken kernels are set aside. The work requires attention, but not speed. She has done this almost every day since she was a little girl. Now her hair has turned silver beneath her linen scarf, yet her fingers still remember every movement. Across from her sits her granddaughter. The young girl watches carefully. At first she simply observes. Then, after a quiet smile from her grandmother, she reaches into the basket herself. Her fingers move less confidently. She accidentally let several grains slip through her hand. The grandmother says nothing. She simply demonstrates once more. Soon the child tries again. This time she is slower, more careful. The grain falls neatly back into the basket. The older woman nods with quiet approval. Lessons in ancient Egypt often happen this way. No classroom. No written instructions. Only patient hands teaching younger hands. Nearby, another family prepares to bake enough bread for several days. The morning oven is already warm. Fresh dough rests beneath a linen cloth. As it waits, the surface slowly changes. Tiny bubbles begin forming inside. The dough becomes lighter beneath gentle fingers. The baker smiles almost without thinking. The bread is ready. She divides the dough into several equal portions. Some loaves will remain plain. Others will receive crushed dates folded gently into the center. One small loaf is sprinkled with fragrant seeds saved especially for special occasions. Not every breakfast is exactly the same. Even simple families enjoy small changes whenever the harvest has been kind. The clay oven glows warmly. The baker reaches inside with practiced confidence. Years of experience have taught her exactly how close her hands may safely come to the hot walls. The dough disappears into the oven. Now there is nothing to do except wait. Waiting is a familiar part of Egyptian life. Farmers wait for floods. Fishermen wait for fish. Potters wait for clay to dry. Brewers wait for fermentation. Bakers wait for bread. The entire rhythm of the civilization is built upon patience. No one expects nature to hurry. No one expects grain to grow overnight. Time itself seems slower beside the Nile. As the bread bakes, the smell begins drifting through the open doorway. It mingles with the fragrance of warm earth after irrigation. A pair of pigeons lands upon the roof. They tilt their heads curiously before fluttering away again. A sleepy cat stretches beneath a wooden stool. Even the animals seem relaxed by the familiar routine. Not far away, a young boy walks carefully toward the river carrying two empty clay jars suspended from a wooden pole across his shoulders. The jars sway gently with each step. They knock softly against one another. He has made this journey almost every morning for years. The path is worn smooth by countless feet. He knows every bend, every stone, every patch of shade. Reaching the river, he kneels carefully. The Nile is calm today. Its surface mirrors the sky so perfectly that it almost appears endless. Small fish dart beneath the surface. Dragonflies skim lightly across the water. Tall papyrus plants whisper as the breeze passes through them. The boy lowers the first jar. Water flows inside with a pleasant bubbling sound. He fills the second just as carefully. For a moment he remains kneeling beside the river. He watches a fishing boat glide quietly past. The fishermen nod politely. The boy smiles in return. No words are exchanged. None are needed. Life here is filled with these small moments of silent understanding. He lifts the heavy jars onto his shoulders once more and begins the slow walk home. This water will become tomorrow's bread. Tomorrow's beer. Tomorrow's breakfast. Every household depends upon the quiet generosity of the Nile. Farther downstream, several women kneel along the riverbank washing linen clothing. The cloth moves gently beneath their hands. Soap made from modern ingredients does not exist, but water, sand, and careful scrubbing clean the fabric surprisingly well. As they work, they speak softly together. One woman mentions that her oldest son has begun learning stone carving. Another shares news of a healthy calf born during the night. Someone laughs quietly as a curious goose wanders too close to the washing. Their conversation flows as gently as the river itself. Nearby, Baskets containing fresh onions rest beneath the shade of a sycamore tree. Their sharp scent mixes with the sweeter smell of ripe figs lying in another basket. A merchant carefully arranges everything before opening his small market stall. He knows which customers prefer larger onions. He remembers which family always buys extra dates for their children. He recognizes the temple servant who visits every third morning. Business here is built upon memory as much as trade. The merchant himself has already eaten breakfast. He remembers tearing warm bread into pieces while sitting beside his wife before sunrise. Now, as he arranges his goods, that meal feels pleasantly distant. It has become part of the quiet beginning of another ordinary day. A little farther inland, fields of emmer wheat ripple softly beneath the growing breeze. The grain has nearly reached maturity. Golden heads bow gently as if greeting the wind. Farmers pause to examine the stalks. They rub kernels between rough fingers. The harvest is still some weeks away, but they are already thinking ahead. Every field represents countless future breakfasts. Every healthy stalk promises another loaf of bread. One older farmer bends slowly to inspect the soil. He scoops up a handful of earth. It feels slightly damp beneath the surface. Good. The irrigation channels have done their work. He smiles quietly before continuing down the narrow path. His grandson follows behind carrying a wooden tool nearly as tall as himself. The child asks simple questions. When will the grain be ready? Why do birds like these fields? How much bread can one basket of barley make? The grandfather answers patiently. Sometimes with words. Sometimes simply by pointing toward the plants. Learning happens slowly. Just like everything else. Near the edge of the cultivated land, a group of laborers repairing an irrigation canal stop briefly to rest. They sit together beneath a cluster of date palms. One man unwraps a linen cloth. Inside is the last piece of breakfast bread he saved before leaving home. Another worker has dried fish. Someone else carries fresh cucumbers picked before sunrise. Without discussion, they begin sharing. The bread passes from one hand to another. The fish is divided into smaller pieces. The cucumbers are broken by hand. Each person contributes something. Each person receives something. The meal becomes richer through generosity. When they finish eating, they drink cool water from a shared clay jar. The jar has been buried partly in damp soil to keep the water cooler. It works remarkably well. The water feels refreshing despite the strengthening heat. The men rest only a few minutes longer. Soon they return to clearing mud from the canal. Without these channels, the fields would dry. Without the fields, there would be no grain. Without grain, there would be no breakfast. The entire cycle depends upon careful work that often goes unnoticed. Meanwhile, in a nearby town, a temple kitchen has become busy. Several workers prepare bread not only for the priests but also for offerings that will be placed before sacred statues. Rows of loaves line long wooden tables. Some are shaped like circles. Others resemble small animals or flowers. A few are decorated with simple patterns pressed into the dough before baking. The aroma filling the kitchen is wonderful. Warm grain. Honey. Sesame. Fresh herbs. The temple bakers work with extraordinary care. Each loaf is expected to be beautiful as well as nourishing. Outside the temple walls, ordinary families continue their own daily routines. A mother nurses her baby beneath a shaded porch while stirring a pot of grain for tomorrow's dough. An elderly neighbor stops to exchange greetings. A little boy chases chickens through the dusty lane until his older sister gently reminds him to help gather firewood. Life unfolds without hurry. Even the smallest chores seem connected to breakfast in one way or another. Firewood dries beside the wall because tomorrow's oven will need fuel. Fresh water cools inside clay jars because tomorrow's dough will need moisture. Grain rests inside sealed storage bins because tomorrow's family will wake hungry once again. The preparation never truly ends. As the sun climbs higher, shadows begin shortening across the village. The cool hours are slowly disappearing. Workers wipe sweat from their brows. The air grows heavier. Still, the memory of breakfast remains comforting. It was eaten while birds were singing. While the breeze was gentle. While the ovens filled the village with the smell of fresh bread. Many people quietly look forward to that peaceful hour every evening before they sleep. They know it will come again. The morning is dependable. The river is dependable. The bread, if the harvest has been kind, is dependable too. There is deep comfort in such certainty. Across the Nile Valley, thousands of households are already preparing for another sunrise, even while this day continues. A woman quietly checks her grain jars. A baker gathers more fuel. A fisherman hangs fresh fish to dry. A shepherd counts his goats before moving them toward fresh grazing. Every task is another thread woven into the fabric of tomorrow morning. The ancient Egyptians may not think of it this way. For them, it is simply life. A life measured not by clocks, but by sunrise and sunset. By the flooding of the Nile. By the growing of grain. By the smell of bread rising from warm clay ovens before the first golden light touches the river. And so, beneath the ever-brightening Egyptian sky, another peaceful day continues, while the quiet promise of tomorrow's breakfast waits patiently in every field, every storage jar, every grinding stone, and every gentle pair of hands that keeps this timeless rhythm alive. The morning has now given way to the middle of the day. The bright sun stands high above the Nile Valley, pouring warm light across the fields, the villages, and the slow-moving river that has quietly shaped every part of Egyptian life. The gentle coolness of dawn has become only a memory, and the shade cast by palm trees grows smaller with each passing hour. The sounds of breakfast have faded. No grinding stones scrape through the still air. The clay ovens rest after their busy morning. The smell of fresh bread has slowly drifted away, replaced by the warm scent of dry earth, river mud, and sun-baked brick. Yet breakfast is never far from anyone's thoughts. For every family, the next morning begins long before the next sunrise. Even while today's work continues, tomorrow's meal is already being prepared. In a quiet courtyard shaded by woven reed mats, a middle-aged woman kneels beside several large clay storage jars. Their rounded sides are cool inside despite the growing heat outside. She removes the heavy lid from one of them and looks carefully inside. The jar is nearly half full. She smiles to herself. There is enough barley for several more days. She reaches inside with a small woven basket and lifts out only what she needs. Not too much. Not too little. Grain is precious. Every handful represents weeks of careful farming beneath the Egyptian sun. Every kernel has traveled a long journey. It grew from rich black soil left behind by the Nile flood. It survived hungry birds, dry winds, and long months of patient waiting. It was harvested by hand. Carried in baskets. Separated from straw. Cleaned. Stored. Protected from insects. Only then does it arrive here, in the quiet darkness of a clay jar. She pours the grain onto a flat woven tray. Sunlight catches the golden kernels. Each one seems small. Together they will become enough bread to feed a family. The work begins once again. She gently shakes the tray. Tiny pieces of dust rise into the warm afternoon air. A few bits of straw remain hidden among the grain. Her fingers find them almost without looking. Years of practice have taught her what belongs and what does not. Nearby, her young son watches with quiet curiosity. He is too small to understand every step. Still, he enjoys helping. His mother hands him a tiny handful of grain. He studies it closely. Rolling the kernels between his fingers, he asks where bread comes from. She smiles. Instead of answering immediately, she points beyond the village. Beyond the palm trees. Toward the wide fields stretching beside the Nile. The little boy follows her finger. Far away he can see tiny figures working beneath the bright sun. Those people, she quietly explains, help make every loaf. The farmers. The harvesters. The millers. The bakers. Even the potter who shaped the oven. Even the man who cut reeds for the fire. Bread belongs to many hands. The boy nods slowly. He looks once more at the grain resting in his palm. Perhaps it feels a little more important now. Not far from the village, an elderly farmer rests beneath the broad branches of a sycamore fig tree. The shade is welcome. The afternoon sun has become intense. His sandals are dusty. His linen clothing is damp with sweat. Beside him lies the small cloth that held his breakfast. Only a few crumbs remain. He brushes them into his hand rather than letting them fall onto the ground. Food is not carelessly wasted. The crumbs are eaten just as gratefully as the larger pieces. After drinking cool water from a clay jar buried partly in damp soil, he closes his eyes for a few peaceful moments. Around him the fields are alive with gentle sounds. Grasshoppers sing. A distant ox snorts softly. The breeze moves slowly through the tall grain. It is enough to make the hottest part of the day feel almost comfortable. Nearby, younger workers continue repairing an irrigation channel. Wooden shovels lift wet earth. Mud is packed carefully against the canal walls. The water must flow smoothly. Too much water can wash away valuable soil. Too little water leaves crops thirsty. Finding the balance requires experience more than strength. One older laborer kneels beside the canal and watches the water for several minutes without speaking. The younger men wait patiently. Finally he points to one small section where the current moves too quickly. Together they reshape the bank. The flow immediately becomes calmer. No one celebrates. The work simply continues. So much of Egyptian life depends upon quiet observation. A person who watches carefully often succeeds better than one who rushes. The same is true in the kitchen. The same is true in the bakery. The same is true in the fields. As the afternoon stretches onward, a gentle breeze arrives from the north. Boats upon the Nile raise simple linen sails. The white cloth catches the wind. Slowly the boats begin moving upstream, carried by the breeze while the river itself continues flowing north. An experienced boatman smiles as he adjusts the ropes. He has traveled this river since childhood. Every bend feels familiar. Every sandbank has its own memory. Today his boat carries sacks of barley from one farming village to another. The grain is protected beneath woven mats. He knows families are waiting for it. Some of it will become bread within days. Some may remain stored for months. As the boat glides across the quiet water, the boatman reaches into a small basket beside him. Inside is a handful of dried figs left over from breakfast. They have become slightly warmer beneath the afternoon sun. He eats them slowly while watching herons standing motionless along the riverbank. Nothing disturbs the peaceful rhythm. Even travel feels gentle upon the Nile. In another village farther south, a family of potters spends the afternoon shaping new vessels from soft river clay. Their workshop is cool compared with the bright sunlight outside. The youngest apprentice turns a simple wheel while his father shapes wet clay with careful fingers. A large storage jar slowly rises beneath his hands. Its walls become thinner and smoother with each gentle touch. This jar may one day hold grain for breakfast, or water, or beer, or flour waiting to become dough. The potter thinks little about its future. His task is simply to make it strong. When the jar is finished, it joins many others drying in neat rows beneath a shaded roof. The afternoon breeze passes gently across their surfaces. Tomorrow they may enter the kiln. Weeks from now they may stand inside homes throughout the Nile Valley. Every breakfast depends upon these quiet craftsmen whose names history rarely remembers. Near the potter's workshop, children play beneath the shade of date palms. Their games are simple. A smooth stone becomes a toy. Lines drawn in the dust become imaginary roads. One little girl pretends to bake bread using handfuls of sand inside a broken clay bowl. She copies the movements she has watched her mother perform every morning. She stirs. She kneads. She smiles proudly at her imaginary loaf. Her older brother laughs softly, but not unkindly. Soon he joins her game, pretending to gather firewood. Even children's play reflects the daily rhythm surrounding them. Morning routines become familiar long before adulthood. As the heat begins its slow journey toward evening, shadows gradually lengthen once more. Workers notice the change. Birds become more active again. Goats wander back toward the village. The air feels just a little easier to breathe. A shepherd pauses on a gentle rise overlooking the Nile. From here he can see green fields stretching toward the river. Small villages rest among clusters of palm trees. Thin lines of smoke already begin rising from a few homes where evening meals are being prepared. He thinks briefly about his own house. His wife will probably begin grinding grain before sunset. Not because tonight's meal requires it. Because tomorrow morning will. The thought brings quiet comfort. Some routines never change. Back in the village, women gather beside the communal grinding stones once more. The afternoon light is softer now. Long shadows stretch across the ground. The scraping rhythm begins again. Forward. Back. Forward. Back. Conversation flows gently between the steady movements. One woman speaks of her daughter's upcoming marriage. Another mentions that the river seems especially calm this season. An older neighbor remembers a flood many years ago when the water rose higher than anyone expected. The younger women listen carefully. Stories travel from one generation to the next while flour slowly gathers beneath the grinding stones. Nearby, a little boy has fallen asleep against his mother's shoulder. The quiet rhythm of the grinding stones seems almost like a lullaby. He dreams peacefully while the work continues around him. The smell of fresh flour mixes with the scent of evening air. One woman lifts the finished flour into a woven basket. She covers it carefully with linen cloth. Tomorrow before sunrise she will mix it with cool river water. She already knows exactly how much will be needed. Enough for her husband. Enough for the children. Enough to save a little for later. She has measured dough with her hands for so many years that she no longer needs to think about it. As the sun slowly begins descending toward the western desert, the entire Nile Valley seems to relax. The harsh brightness softens into warm golden light. Palm trees cast long graceful shadows. The river glows like polished copper. Birds circle lazily above the marshes before settling among the reeds for the evening. Families gradually return home from the fields. Stone workers brush dust from their clothing. Fishermen carry the day's catch toward waiting kitchens. Children run to greet tired parents at the village entrance. Inside one modest home, the grandmother who woke before dawn now places tomorrow's flour inside a clean clay bowl. She covers it with linen. Beside it she sets a small jar of water drawn from the Nile earlier that morning. The grinding stone has been brushed clean. The oven has been swept. The firewood has been stacked neatly beside the wall. Everything is ready. Not for tonight. For tomorrow. For another peaceful breakfast before sunrise. She pauses for a moment and looks through the open doorway. Beyond the rooftops, the evening sun slips slowly toward the horizon. The first cool breeze of night begins to stir. Another day has almost completed its gentle circle. And somewhere beyond the quiet fields, the patient waters of the Nile continue flowing through the gathering dusk, carrying with them the promise of yet another ancient morning, when warm bread, simple beer, and the familiar rhythm of ordinary life will begin again before the first birds welcome the light. The evening settles slowly across the Nile Valley, almost as gently as a linen cloth being placed over a sleeping child. The bright heat that ruled the afternoon begins to loosen its hold upon the land. The air becomes softer. The shadows stretch farther across the fields. Palm trees sway with a little more freedom as the cool breeze returns from the north. For many people, this is one of the most welcome moments of the day. The hardest work is nearly finished. Stone tools are laid aside. Fishing nets are folded carefully. Wooden hoes are carried back toward the village. The day's labor slowly gives way to the peaceful routines of home. Along the dusty paths, families begin returning one by one. A farmer walks with tired but steady steps, carrying his hoe across one shoulder. Fine dust clings to his sandals and the hem of his linen kilt. His skin is warm from the sun, and his hands bear the roughness that comes from years of working the fertile soil beside the Nile. As he approaches his home, two young children run toward him. The younger one wraps small arms around his leg. The older child proudly carries a clay cup filled with cool water. The farmer smiles gently before taking a slow drink. The water has rested all afternoon inside a porous clay jar, where tiny amounts of moisture have slowly evaporated through the surface, keeping the remaining water pleasantly cool. It tastes fresh, simple, refreshing. After a long day beneath the Egyptian sun, nothing feels quite as welcome. Inside the house, his wife has already begun preparing the evening meal. The clay oven has been warmed once again. Its walls hold heat from the glowing fire inside. Nearby rests the flour that was ground only a short while ago. Tomorrow's breakfast has already begun, even though tonight has barely arrived. She pours some of the fresh flour into a wide clay bowl. The fine powder slips quietly through her fingers like pale desert sand. A little water is added. Not much. Just enough to begin forming tomorrow's dough. She stirs slowly with one hand while steadying the bowl with the other. The mixture is thick, smooth, cool against her skin. She covers it with a clean linen cloth and places it in the coolest corner of the room. By dawn it will have changed ever so slightly, making tomorrow's bread easier to prepare. This small act takes only a few moments. Yet it quietly connects today with tomorrow. It is impossible to separate one morning from the next. Each breakfast begins the evening before. Outside, the village grows livelier for a little while. Neighbors greet one another after returning from their work. Soft conversations drip through open doorways. Children chase one another around stacks of bundled reeds. A dog wanders hopefully from house to house, searching for a dropped crumb of bread. The smell of evening cooking spreads through the narrow streets. roasted onions, fresh herbs, warm bread, a little fish roasting over glowing coals. The fragrances mingle together beneath the slowly darkening sky. In one home, an elderly grandfather sits beneath the shade of a sycamore tree while his grandchildren gather around him. He holds a small piece of bread in weathered hands. The loaf is not fresh from the oven. It was baked yesterday. Still, it remains good. He tears off tiny pieces and shares them among the children. As they eat, he begins telling them about the Nile. Not a grand story of kings or temples. Simply memories. He remembers a flood from many years ago, when the water reached farther than anyone expected. He remembers helping his own father repair an irrigation channel after the flood waters receded. He remembers waking before sunrise as a small boy to grind grain beside his mother. The children listen quietly. For them, these stories feel almost magical. For the grandfather, they are simply life. His memories are filled with ordinary mornings. The smell of bread. The scrape of grinding stones. The cool air before dawn. These simple things remain with him more clearly than almost anything else. Nearby, a young mother teaches her daughter how to knead dough. The little girl's hands disappear almost completely beneath the soft mixture. She presses too gently at first. The dough barely changes shape. Her mother smiles kindly and places her own hands over the child's. Together they press. Fold. Turn. Press again. The movements are slow and patient. There is no hurry. If the dough takes a little longer, tomorrow will still arrive. The little girl giggles as flour dust settles across her arms. She leaves tiny handprints on the edge of the bowl. Her mother laughs softly before brushing away the extra flour. One day, many years from now, this little girl may teach another child in exactly the same way. Some traditions survive because they are written. Others survive because loving hands quietly guide younger ones. As twilight deepens, the first stars begin appearing above the western desert. Their light is faint at first. Soon more stars join them. The sky grows darker, becoming a vast blanket filled with countless tiny points of light. The Egyptians know these stars well. Many farmers judge the seasons by watching them. Boatmen use them while traveling upon the river after sunset. Priests observe them carefully during sacred ceremonies. For ordinary families, however, the stars simply mark another peaceful evening. The day's work is finished. Rest has arrived. Along the Nile itself, the water reflects the evening sky. Small ripples catch the fading light. A fisherman unties his boat from a wooden post. Not to fish. Only to move it a little farther into deeper water for the night. He checks the ropes carefully. Everything is secure. Tomorrow, long before sunrise, he will return. His breakfast will likely be eaten while sitting inside this very boat. Bread wrapped in linen. Perhaps an onion. Perhaps dried fish. Perhaps a few dates if the season has been generous. The thought makes him smile. Simple meals taste especially good beside the quiet river. Not far away, several donkeys stand patiently beside woven baskets filled with grain. The day's harvest has finally reached the village storehouse. Workers unload the baskets one at a time. Each is poured carefully into large storage bins lined with smooth clay. The sound is soft. Thousands of tiny kernels sliding together like gentle rain. The overseer counts each basket. Not because he distrusts the workers. Simply because careful records help every family survive until the next harvest. The grain resting here tonight may become breakfast many months from now. Time moves differently when food must be planned across entire seasons. Inside the storehouse, the air smells warm and dry. The fragrance of barley fills every corner. Dust hangs quietly in the fading light. A pair of sparrows flutters briefly through an open doorway before disappearing once again. The workers finish their task. Heavy wooden doors are closed. The grain rests safely until morning. Back in the village, the communal oven has finally cooled. Its outer walls remain warm enough to touch. A young apprentice baker sweeps away loose ash with a bundle of reeds. Tomorrow before dawn he will light the fire once again. He has repeated this routine so often that he can almost imagine tomorrow's morning already. The first spark. The smell of smoke. The warm glow inside the clay oven. The first loaf beginning to bake. The familiar rhythm brings him quiet satisfaction. Nearby, the village potter carefully inspects several newly fired bowls. He taps each gently with his fingertip. A clear sound tells him the clay has baked well. A dull sound means the bowl may crack someday. He sets aside the strongest pieces. Perhaps one of these bowls will soon hold flour. Perhaps another will carry beer to a group of builders. Perhaps another will become part of a family's breakfast table for many years. The potter cannot know. His work quietly becomes part of countless lives. As darkness settles more completely, cooking fires grow smaller. Families finish their evening meals. Clay bowls are washed. Leftover bread is wrapped carefully in linen to keep it from drying too quickly. Nothing useful is left uncovered. A loaf represents too much labor to waste. Outside, children grow sleepy. The excitement of the day slowly disappears. One by one they curl up upon woven sleeping mats. Some still hold small wooden toys carved by their fathers. Others fall asleep almost before lying down. Parents lower their voices. The house becomes peaceful. An older woman walks through the room, checking tomorrow's preparations. The flour is ready. The water jar is full. Firewood has been gathered. The grinding stone is clean. Everything waits quietly for dawn. She blows gently upon the last glowing ember of the cooking fire, covering it with warm ash so that a little heat remains until morning. This simple habit saves precious time. Tomorrow's fire will awaken more quickly. Another tiny task. Another thoughtful preparation. The moon rises above the eastern horizon. Its pale light spreads across the river. Palm trees become dark silhouettes against the silver sky. The desert beyond the green valley seems calm beyond measure. Even the warm wind has become quieter. Only the Nile continues its endless journey. Its waters never sleep. They flow gently through the darkness exactly as they flowed yesterday, and exactly as they will tomorrow. Inside the homes, breathing becomes slow and even. Families rest after another honest day of work. Builders, farmers, weavers, potters, fishermen, scribes, merchants. Each has followed a different path through the day. Yet they all share one certainty. Before the next sunrise, they will wake once more. They will hear the first birds. They will feel the cool air before the heat arrives. They will uncover the bowl of prepared dough. They will light the clay oven. They will smell fresh bread rising into the quiet morning. And as the first gentle light touches the peaceful waters of the Nile, another ancient Egyptian breakfast will begin exactly as it has for generations, filling humble homes with warmth, familiar comfort, and the quiet promise of another day lived beside the timeless river. The night has become deep and wonderfully still. Above the Nile Valley, countless stars shine with a quiet steadiness that has comforted travelers, farmers, fishermen and families for thousands of years. The moon hangs low above the eastern desert, bathing the river in soft silver light. Every ripple seems to carry a tiny reflection of the heavens, and the water glides onward with the same patient rhythm it has followed since long before the first villages stood upon its banks. Most of the homes are silent now. The last cooking fires have become small circles of glowing embers hidden beneath pale ash. Clay ovens, so busy only hours before, now rest in complete darkness. The grinding stones are still. The wooden bread paddles lean quietly against the walls. The woven baskets that carried grain through the village earlier in the day now stand empty, waiting for another morning. The entire settlement seems to breathe slowly. Inside one modest house, a grandmother wakes for only a moment. Perhaps she has grown accustomed to waking lightly after so many years of caring for children and grandchildren. She listens. The room is peaceful. She hears the soft breathing of her family. Outside, somewhere beyond the walls, a night bird calls once before falling silent again. Satisfied that everything is well, she closes her eyes once more. Only a short time remains before dawn. Time passes almost unnoticed. The stars continue their slow journey across the sky. The cool air slips gently through the open doorway, carrying with it the fresh scent of river water and damp reeds. In the distance, somewhere along the Nile, a fisherman is already awake. His day begins even earlier than most. He steps carefully through the sleeping village, carrying a neatly folded fishing net across one shoulder and a small clay lamp in his hand. The flame is tiny. Just enough to guide his feet along the familiar path. He knows every turn, every smooth stone, every tree, every place where the path dips slightly toward the river. He has walked this way since he was a boy following behind his father. When he reaches the riverbank, he pauses. The Nile is almost perfectly still. Mist floats gently above the water, drifting in long white ribbons that seem to belong more to dreams than to the waking world. He unties his small wooden boat. The rope slides softly through his fingers. The boat rocks almost imperceptibly as he steps aboard. With slow, practiced movements, he pushes away from the shore. The first strokes of his oar create only the faintest sound. The river accepts him quietly. As his boat glides into the darkness, he unwraps a small bundle prepared the evening before. Inside is breakfast. A round loaf of barley bread. A few dried figs. Half of a sweet onion. The bread has cooled since it left the oven yesterday, but it still smells pleasantly of roasted grain. He tears away a small piece and chews slowly while the boat drifts with the gentle current. There is no hurry. The fish will still be there after breakfast. The river teaches patience better than any teacher could. Farther upstream, another household begins to stir. A young mother opens her eyes before the first bird has begun to sing. For a moment she remains lying quietly beside her sleeping children. She listens to the silence. This peaceful hour belongs only to those who wake before the world. She rises carefully, wrapping a simple linen cloth around her shoulders against the cool morning air. The floor beneath her bare feet feels pleasantly cool. Outside, the eastern horizon is still dark, but she knows dawn is approaching. She uncovers the bowl of dough prepared the evening before. The cloth lifts away with a gentle rustle. The dough has changed during the night. It feels softer now. Lighter. More willing beneath her fingers. She smiles without thinking. Everything has happened exactly as she hoped. Nearby, her husband steps outside to gather dry reeds stored beneath a small shelter. The bundles crackle softly as he lifts them. They have been drying in the sun for many weeks. Now they will become the first fire of another day. He kneels beside the clay oven. Yesterday's warm ashes still hide a few tiny glowing embers beneath them. He blows gently. Very gently. The embers brighten. A faint orange glow appears. He adds a handful of dry reeds. A thin line of smoke rises into the cool air. Soon a small flame dances quietly inside the oven. There is something deeply comforting about watching a morning fire awaken. Its warmth spreads slowly. The clay walls begin absorbing the heat. The smell of smoke drifts across the courtyard. Not unpleasant. Simply familiar. The kind of scent that tells everyone nearby another day has begun. As the oven grows hotter, the woman shapes the dough into neat round loaves. Each one rests comfortably in her hands. She smooths the surface with damp fingers before placing them onto a woven board. The youngest child stirs from sleep. He blinks slowly. For a few moments he simply watches his mother working. This scene has greeted him nearly every morning of his young life. The warm glow of the oven. The smell of fresh dough. The quiet movements of familiar hands. Even before he is fully awake, these simple sights make him feel safe. Outside, another neighbor begins grinding grain. The scraping rhythm returns to the village. Forward. Back. Forward. Back. The sound is steady. Gentle. Almost musical. Soon another grinding stone joins in. Then another. Across the village, dozens of households begin the same work. Different homes. Different families. The same peaceful rhythm. The first birds awaken. A dove calls softly from the roof of a nearby house. Swallows dart through the pale sky, their wings catching the first hints of approaching daylight. Far across the fields, an ibis spreads its broad wings before lifting gracefully into the morning air. The village is waking together. No bells ring. No voices call people from their beds. Nature itself provides every signal. The birds. The changing sky. The cool breeze. The quiet certainty that another sunrise is near. In the baker's workshop, the ovens have already become wonderfully hot. The master baker arrives before nearly everyone else. He checks each fire with experienced eyes. Some need another bundle of reeds. Others are ready. His apprentice carries baskets of prepared dough across the floor. The room smells of flour, smoke, and warm clay. The baker presses one finger gently into a loaf. The dough slowly springs back. Perfect. Without a word, he places it inside the oven. The apprentice watches closely. Every morning teaches another small lesson. Not through speeches. Not through written instructions. Simply by careful observation. Outside the workshop, the first customers begin arriving. A temple servant carrying empty baskets. A farmer who prefers buying bread before walking to his fields. An elderly widow who lives alone and no longer bakes every day. The baker greets each person with quiet familiarity. Some pay with grain. Others with vegetables. One offers a bundle of dried fish. Another promises to repair the bakery roof before the next flood season. Trade moves gently through relationships built over many years. The smell of fresh bread spreads through the village once again. It slips through narrow streets. Past sleeping dogs. Across shaded courtyards. Toward the riverbank. The fragrance seems almost capable of waking those who still sleep. Inside one home, a little girl sits beside her grandmother watching the first loaf emerge from the oven. Steam rises into the cool air. The crust shines softly in the morning light. The grandmother waits patiently before touching it. fresh bread is too hot to hurry. She places it upon a woven mat to cool just enough. The little girl watches every movement. Her stomach growls quietly. The grandmother smiles. "Soon," she says. "Soon." Patience makes breakfast taste even better. When the loaf has cooled slightly, they gather around a low wooden table. The father returns from feeding the family's goats. The older son has already filled 2 clay jars with water from the Nile. Everyone takes a place. There are no chairs. Only woven mats. Clay bowls. Simple cups. The grandmother tears the first loaf by hand. The crust cracks with a satisfying sound. Warm steam escapes into the room. She passes pieces to each member of the family. Fresh goat cheese is placed in a small bowl. A handful of dates rests nearby. An onion is sliced into thick pieces. A clay jar of mild barley beer stands ready. The meal is humble. Yet nothing feels lacking. The family eats slowly. No one rushes to leave. For these few quiet moments, before the labor of another day begins, they simply enjoy being together. Outside, the village continues awakening. Boats leave the riverbank. Donkeys begin carrying loads toward the fields. The first merchants arrange their goods beneath woven canopies. Children sweep dust from doorways. Women exchange gentle morning greetings while carrying baskets of grain. Smoke rises from dozens of ovens at once, drifting upward into the brightening sky. The Nile reflects the first golden rays of the sun. Mist slowly disappears from its surface. The coolness of dawn begins its gentle retreat before the coming warmth. Another ancient morning has arrived. Another breakfast has filled countless homes with the comforting scent of fresh bread and the quiet sounds of ordinary life. No great ceremony marks the moment. No trumpet announces the new day. Only the timeless rhythm of families waking before sunrise, tending their ovens, sharing simple food, and preparing themselves for another peaceful day beside the calm, faithful waters of the Nile. The first light of morning now spreads across the Nile Valley with quiet confidence. The soft colors of dawn gradually become richer as the sun rises above the eastern horizon. Golden light touches the tops of the date palms first, then the roofs of the mud brick houses, and finally the narrow footpaths that wind through the village toward the fields and the river. The day has truly begun. The cool air still lingers for a little while, and many people take a slow breath before stepping into another day of work. They know that before long the warmth will become heavy upon their shoulders. These peaceful moments, just after breakfast and before the strongest sunlight arrives, are among the most pleasant of the entire day. In one home, the family remains seated together even after the last pieces of bread have been eaten. No one seems eager to stand. The father cradles a clay cup of mild barley beer between his hands. The mother folds the linen cloth that covered the bread. The children quietly finish the last sweet bites of their dates, chewing slowly as if hoping the flavor will last a little longer. Outside, a pair of doves lands upon the flat roof. Their gentle cooing drifts through the open doorway. The youngest child looks upward and smiles. It is a familiar sound. Every morning, the birds seem to arrive at almost exactly the same time. The grandmother gathers the empty bowls one by one. She carries them into the courtyard, where a shallow basin waits beside a large water jar. With careful hands she rinses each bowl, rubbing away tiny crumbs using fine river sand. The pottery has become smooth after many years of use. Some bowls are older than the youngest members of the family. Their edges have been repaired once or twice where small cracks appeared. Nothing useful is thrown away if it can still serve. When the bowls are clean, She places them upside down on a woven reed shelf where the warm morning air will dry them naturally. Nearby, the family's bread basket still holds 2 small loaves. These are not forgotten. They are tomorrow's security. Perhaps one will accompany the father into the fields later today. Perhaps the other will remain for an early meal before fresh bread is baked again. Planning ahead is part of everyday life. No one waits until supplies are gone before thinking about the next meal. Near the village entrance, several farmers gather before walking toward their fields together. Each carries simple tools across broad shoulders. Wooden hoes polished by years of use. Bundles of rope. Small woven baskets. One man carries a loaf wrapped carefully inside a linen cloth. Another has tucked several onions into the fold of his belt. A third balances a clay jar filled with beer against his hip. Their breakfasts are over, but part of the meal travels with them. The morning is still young. Many hours remain before they return home. As they walk, their conversation is quiet and unhurried. They speak about the water level in the irrigation canals. One mentions that the barley appears especially healthy this season. Another wonders whether the northern wind will remain gentle enough for boats traveling upstream. These conversations have taken place for countless generations. Not because life never changes, but because the land itself asks the same questions year after year. Will there be enough water? Will the grain grow well? Will the harvest fill the storage jars? Everything begins there. In the fields. A little farther away, 2 brothers guide a pair of oxen toward freshly prepared soil. The animals move slowly, their broad hooves pressing deep into the damp earth left moist by irrigation. Wooden yokes creak softly with every step. The younger brother walks beside the animals, occasionally speaking to them in a calm voice. The older brother follows behind, guiding the simple plow. The soil turns over in long, even lines. Dark earth appears beneath the lighter surface. Birds quickly gather behind the plow. Small white egrets step carefully through the fresh soil, searching for insects uncovered by the work. The brothers smile as they watch them. The birds have become familiar companions. Almost every farmer expects to see them. Back in the village, the baker's workshop remains wonderfully busy. The first rush of customers has passed, but the ovens continue producing fresh loaves. A temple servant arrives with a wooden tray. Today's offering requires several beautifully shaped breads. The baker selects the finest loaves from the cooling rack. Each has browned evenly. Each carries the rich aroma of roasted grain. The servant thanks him with a quiet nod before placing the bread carefully into a woven basket lined with clean linen. Even bread offered in sacred places begins in the same way as bread baked for ordinary homes. The same grain. The same water. The same patient hands. Only its destination is different. Inside the workshop, the apprentice sweeps loose flour from the floor. The fine white dust catches the morning sunlight streaming through the doorway. Tiny particles drift lazily through the air before settling once again. The apprentice pauses for a moment to stretch his back. Even baking demands strength. Lifting heavy sacks of grain. Kneading large bowls of dough. Tending the hot ovens. The work is honest. Steady. Never hurried. Across the river, another village awakens in much the same way. The houses look slightly different. Some are larger. Some are smaller. Yet the rhythm remains wonderfully familiar. Smoke rises from ovens. Grinding stones begin their slow song. Children fetch water. Women prepare dough. Fishermen untie boats. Every settlement beside the Nile shares these quiet beginnings. The river binds them together. Not only through water, but through routine, through shared seasons, through the grain that grows in its fertile soil. One elderly fisherman sits alone beside his boat after finishing breakfast. His weathered hands carefully inspect a fishing net spread across his lap. Several strands have broken during yesterday's work. He threads new fibers through the old ones with patient precision. Repairing a net cannot be rushed. A careless knot may cost an entire day's catch. As he works, he hums softly to himself. The tune is old. Perhaps his father hummed the same melody. Perhaps his grandfather before him. No one remembers where it began. Like the river, it simply continues. A cool breeze ripples across the water. Tiny waves tap gently against the wooden side of the boat. The fisherman looks toward the opposite bank, where palm trees sway quietly in the morning light. He smiles. It is a good morning. Not because anything extraordinary has happened. Simply because the river is calm. The bread was fresh. The day has begun peacefully. Sometimes that is more than enough. Farther north, a merchant's household enjoys a breakfast that is slightly more varied than most. Their table includes fresh grapes gathered from a nearby vineyard. A small bowl of honey glows golden in the morning light. Soft cheese rests beside carefully baked white loaves made from finely sifted flour. Even here, however, the atmosphere is simple. The family eats without great ceremony. The children laugh quietly as they dip small pieces of bread into the honey. The father discusses the day's journey along the river. Two servants prepare baskets of goods that will soon be loaded onto waiting boats. Trade will carry linen cloth, pottery, fragrant oils, and grain to neighboring towns. The merchant understands that every successful journey depends upon good planning. Before leaving, he checks his own travel provisions. Bread, dried figs, cheese, a skin of water. Everything packed carefully. Even a prosperous merchant begins the day with familiar foods. Near the edge of the settlement, a young scribe sits cross-legged beneath a shaded porch. His breakfast has finished only moments ago. Now he carefully arranges his writing tools. A smooth wooden palette. Small cakes of black and red ink. Several neatly cut reed pens. A roll of fresh papyrus. Before beginning his work, he wipes his hands clean with a damp cloth. Tiny traces of bread flour remain beneath one fingernail. He smiles faintly. The flour reminds him of home. His mother still bakes every morning. Even though he now works in the temple offices, the smell of fresh bread will always mean the beginning of another peaceful day. His first task is to record grain deliveries from nearby farms. One basket. Then another. Then another. He writes carefully. Every mark upon the papyrus represents real food. Real families. Real breakfasts. The numbers are more than symbols. They are the quiet heartbeat of the kingdom. If the grain is counted well, storehouses remain full. If storehouses remain full, families eat. The work of the scribe, though far removed from the fields, still begins and ends with bread. As the sun climbs steadily higher, the village becomes fully alive. Children carry bundles of reeds. Goats wander lazily between houses. Potters shape fresh clay. Carpenters smooth wooden boards. Weavers sit at their looms, their fingers moving with gentle rhythm. Every craft supports another. The weaver makes linen sacks for storing grain. The potter shapes jars for flour. The carpenter repairs bread paddles and kneading tables. The reed gatherer collects fuel for the ovens. No one works alone, even when they appear to. The village itself is like a great woven basket. Every strand depends upon the others. Near midday, an old woman pauses beside her doorway. She shades her eyes with one hand and looks toward the fields. She cannot see her son clearly from this distance. The figures working among the crops are too small now. Still, she knows he is there. Before sunrise she watched him eat warm bread fresh from the oven. She tucked an extra loaf into his bag before he left. Perhaps he has eaten it already. Perhaps he is saving it for later. Either way, she feels content. She turns back inside. On a low shelf rests a bowl of grain waiting to be cleaned before evening. Beside it stands the grinding stone. Tomorrow's breakfast is already waiting patiently. The quiet cycle continues without interruption. Morning becomes afternoon. Afternoon will become evening. Evening will become another peaceful night beneath the stars. And before anyone realizes how quickly time has passed, the first birds will sing once more, the ovens will glow with fresh fire, and another ancient Egyptian breakfast will begin beside the calm, everlasting waters of the Nile. The sun has long since disappeared beyond the western desert. Its last golden light has faded from the mud brick walls, the quiet fields, and the gentle waters of the Nile. One by one, the colors of the day have softened into deep shades of blue and silver, until only the moon and the stars remain to watch over the ancient land. The village is peaceful once more. The ovens, warm only hours ago, now rest beneath a blanket of cooling clay. Their work is finished until another dawn. The grinding stones stand silent. The baskets are neatly stacked. The clay jars are covered. The last traces of fresh bread linger faintly in the evening air before slowly drifting away into the quiet night. Inside the homes, families have settled onto woven mats after another honest day. Builders who lifted heavy stone now sleep with tired but contented bodies. Farmers who walked the fertile fields beside the Nile rest with rough hands folded gently across their chests. Fishermen who greeted the river before sunrise dream beneath simple linen blankets. Potters, weavers, scribes, merchants, servants, mothers, fathers, grandparents, and children all share the same peaceful silence. Tomorrow will ask for their work again. But not tonight. Tonight, the land is allowed to rest. Outside, the Nile continues its endless journey. It flows as quietly as it did yesterday. As quietly as it will tomorrow. Its waters carry moonlight across the valley, passing reeds that whisper softly in the night breeze, gliding past sleeping boats tied carefully along the shore, moving beside fields where next season's grain will one day rise from the rich black earth. Somewhere beneath the stars, a loaf of bread rests beneath a linen cloth, waiting for morning. A clay jar holds cool river water gathered before sunset. A bundle of dried reeds leans beside a silent oven. A bowl of flour waits patiently in the darkness. Everything is ready. Nothing needs to hurry. Before the first bird sings, before the eastern sky begins to glow, gentle hands will awaken once more. A fire will quietly come to life. The first faint ribbon of smoke will curl into the cool morning air. Fresh dough will become warm bread. Simple cups will be filled. Families will gather together while the world is still calm and cool. The rhythm will begin again, just as it has for countless generations. Yet for now, there is only stillness. The palm trees sway gently beneath the stars. The warm desert breeze has softened into a whisper. The insects sing their quiet evening songs among the reeds. Far away, an owl glides silently across the moonlit fields before disappearing into the darkness. The village breathes slowly. The river breathes slowly. Even the desert seems to rest. The great temples stand quietly beneath the night sky. The towering monuments, built by countless ordinary hands, cast long shadows across the sleeping earth. For a little while, they ask nothing of anyone. The kings whose names were carved into stone have become part of history. But the simple lives of the people who baked the bread, tended the ovens, carried the water, sowed the grain, and gathered each morning before sunrise continue to echo in quieter ways. Their footsteps have disappeared from the dusty roads. Their voices have long faded into the desert wind. Yet their gentle routines remain easy to imagine. A loaf of warm bread passed from one hand to another. The soft scrape of a grinding stone before dawn. The comforting smell of grain baking inside a clay oven. The cool touch of the Nile before the heat of the day. The peaceful feeling of sharing a simple breakfast with family while the first light slowly fills the valley. These are the moments that shaped everyday life. Small moments. Patient moments. Moments that asked for nothing except time, care, and quiet hands. As the stars continue their slow journey across the sky, the ancient world grows even quieter. The last lamp is gently covered. The final ember settles beneath a layer of warm ash. The breeze carries the scent of river water through the sleeping village. The Nile flows on. Always flowing. Always patient. Always faithful. And now, as this peaceful journey through ancient Egypt gently comes to rest, you may leave the quiet villages beside the river just as softly as you arrived. Let the sound of slow water remain with you. Let the warmth of fresh bread linger in your thoughts. Let the calm rhythm of ordinary lives fade gently into the distance like the last ripple upon the Nile beneath a sky full of ancient stars. The night is still. The river is calm. The village sleeps. And somewhere, in the endless silence of history, another gentle dawn is already waiting.